Society doesn't fear what you know. It fears what you've stopped believing. And the moment you wake up to reality, you become dangerous to a system that depends on everyone staying asleep. There's something unsettling about a person who refuses to play the game anymore. Someone who sees through the illusions that most people spend their entire lives defending. These individuals walk among us, appearing perfectly normal on the surface, yet there's something about them that makes others uncomfortable. They ask questions that have no easy answers. They challenge assumptions that were never meant to be challenged. And most importantly, they refuse to pretend that the emperor is wearing clothes when he clearly stands naked before them. Today, we're going deep into why awakened people create such fear and resistance in society, and what this reveals about the world we live in. Think about the last time you questioned something everyone around you accepted as normal. Maybe it was the way we work ourselves to exhaustion for decades, calling it success. Maybe it was how we consume endlessly, calling it happiness. Or perhaps it was how we live in constant anxiety about the future, calling it responsibility. When you voiced that question, what happened? Chances are you were met with discomfort, defensiveness, or outright hostility. Not because your question was wrong, but because it was right. And that's exactly the problem. We live in a world built on shared agreements about reality. We agree that certain pieces of paper have value. We agree that certain activities are productive while others are wasteful. We agree that certain paths lead to fulfillment, while others lead to failure. These agreements form the invisible architecture of society, and everyone is expected to honor them without too much examination. But what happens when someone stops agreeing? What happens when a person wakes up and sees these agreements for what they truly are? Not eternal truths, but temporary constructs that serve specific purposes for specific people. The awakened person becomes a walking threat. Not through violence or aggression, but through simple presence. They embody a possibility that most people have buried deep within themselves. The possibility of living differently, of thinking differently, of being free in a world obsessed with control. And this possibility terrifies people far more than any external danger ever could, because it threatens something much deeper than physical safety. It threatens their entire sense of identity and meaning. The comfort of collective sleep. Let's start by understanding why people choose to remain asleep in the first place. And make no mistake, it is a choice, even if most people would never admit it. Sleep is comfortable. Sleep is safe. When you're asleep, you don't have to take responsibility for your life, because you can blame the system, your circumstances, your past, or your luck. When you're asleep, you have the comfort of belonging, of fitting in, of being part of the crowd. There's deep security in knowing that millions of other people see the world exactly as you do. Imagine a fish that spent its entire life in an aquarium. The glass walls are invisible to it. The filtered water is all it knows. The scheduled feeding times are reality itself. Now, imagine another fish appears that has somehow seen beyond the glass. This fish tries to tell the others about the ocean, about the vastness beyond their small container, about the artificial nature of their entire existence. How do you think the other fish respond? They don't celebrate this knowledge. They don't thank the awakened fish for expanding their awareness. They attack it. They call it crazy. They ostracize it. Because accepting what this fish is saying would mean confronting a terrifying truth that everything they believed was real is actually a limited construction, and they have the power to swim beyond it. This is exactly what happens in human society. We build elaborate structures of meaning, careers, relationships, possessions, status, beliefs, and we invest everything into maintaining these structures. Our entire sense of self becomes wrapped up in these constructs. When someone wakes up and points out that these structures are not reality itself, but merely one way of organizing reality, it creates an existential crisis for everyone still invested in the game. Because if the game is arbitrary, then all the sacrifices made for it lose their meaning. All the compromises, all the suffering, all the delayed gratification, it was all for something that wasn't even real in the way we thought it was. The awakened person represents wasted time. They represent wrong choices. They represent a path not taken. And humans will do almost anything to avoid confronting their own regrets and missed opportunities. It's far easier to dismiss the awakened person as crazy, irresponsible, or naive than to consider the possibility that they might be seeing something true that we've been conditioned to ignore. The mechanics of social control. Now let's go deeper into how society actually maintains control over the sleeping masses. because once you understand the mechanisms, you can't unsee them. And this is precisely what makes awakened people so dangerous to the established order. They've seen behind the curtain, and they refuse to pretend otherwise. Every society operates on what we might call manufactured consent. People believe they're making free choices, but those choices exist within a carefully constructed range of acceptable options. You can choose Coke or Pepsi, Democrat or Republican, this career or that career, but you rarely question whether you need soda at all, whether the political system serves you, or whether the concept of career as identity makes any sense. The boundaries of acceptable thought are policed not by obvious censorship, but by subtle social pressure, mockery, and the withdrawal of belonging. Think about how we raise children. From the earliest age, we train them to sit still, follow instructions, accept authority without question, and measure their worth through external validation. We call this education, but what we're really doing is conditioning them to fit into predetermined roles within the economic and social machine. The child who questions too much, who refuses to color inside the lines, who insists on their own authority over their experience, this child is labeled a problem. They're medicated, disciplined, or marginalized until they learn to comply. The same pattern continues throughout life. As adults, we work jobs that often feel meaningless because we need money to survive in an economic system designed to keep us dependent. We consume products we don't need to fill voids created by a culture that profits from our emptiness. We pursue relationships that follow scripts written by movies and magazines rather than authentic connection. We scroll through social media, comparing our lives to carefully curated illusions, feeling inadequate by design. And all of this is presented as normal, as just the way things are, as reality itself. The awakened person sees through this machinery. They recognize that money is not wealth, but a system of control. That status is not achievement, but a hierarchy that benefits those at the top. That busyness is not productivity, but a distraction from the present moment. That security is not found in external circumstances, but in internal peace. And when they start living according to these realizations, they become dangerous. Not because they're trying to tear down society, but because their very existence proves that another way is possible. The system doesn't need everyone to be a true believer. It just needs everyone to participate. The awakened person stops participating in the ways that matter. They might still have a job, still pay their bills, still function in society, but they're no longer invested in the game. They're no longer chasing the carrots or fearing the sticks. And this withdrawal of investment is the greatest threat to any system that depends on collective belief for its power. The mirror effect. Here's where things get really interesting. The discomfort that awakened people create in others has very little to do with what they say or do. It has everything to do with what they reflect back. An awakened person is a mirror, and most people do not like what they see when they look into it. When you encounter someone who has found inner peace, and you're constantly anxious, their presence reminds you of your own turmoil. When you meet someone who lives simply and seems genuinely content, and you're drowning in debt from pursuing more and more possessions, their existence questions your entire approach to life. When you see someone who speaks their truth regardless of social consequences, and you're constantly editing yourself to fit in, their authenticity highlights your own pretense. This is the mirror effect, and it's incredibly uncomfortable. The awakened person isn't trying to make you feel bad. They're often not even talking about their way of life unless asked. But their simple presence, their energy, their way of moving through the world, it all serves as a contrast to the lives most people are living. And that contrast is painful. It brings up all the things we've been avoiding, all the compromises we've made, all the dreams we've abandoned, all the authentic impulses we've suppressed in order to be acceptable, successful, or normal. This is why awakened people are often accused of being judgmental, even when they're saying nothing at all. People feel judged in their presence, but what they're really feeling is their own inner judgment of themselves. That quiet voice inside that knows they're not living authentically, that knows they've sold out in ways large and small, that knows there's more to life than what they're experiencing. That voice gets louder in the presence of someone who has listened to it and changed their life accordingly. The defensive reactions that awakened people trigger, the mockery, the dismissiveness, the anger, the attempts to bring them back into line, these are all forms of self-protection. If we can convince ourselves that the awakened person is wrong, foolish, or deluded, then we don't have to confront what their existence suggests about our own choices. We can stay comfortable in our sleep. We can keep pretending that the life we're living is the only possible life, that our sacrifices were necessary, that we couldn't have done anything differently. But deep down, everyone knows. Everyone has moments of awakening, brief glimpses beyond the conditioning. We've all felt that sense that something is fundamentally off about the way we're living. We've all had that intuition that there's more to existence than what we've been told. The awakened person simply stopped dismissing those moments. They stopped explaining them away. They stopped going back to sleep. And in doing so, they remind everyone else of the choice they're making every day to remain unconscious. The threat to power structures. Let's talk about power, because ultimately that's what this is all about. Every social structure, from the family unit to the corporation to the nation-state, operates on hierarchy and control. Those at the top of these hierarchies benefit enormously from everyone else, accepting their position in the order of things. The awakened person threatens this entire arrangement, not through revolution, but through indifference. Consider how much of our economy depends on people feeling inadequate. The beauty industry thrives on insecurity. The pharmaceutical industry profits from treating symptoms while ignoring causes. The education system creates debt-laden workers rather than free-thinking individuals. The entertainment industry sells distraction from the emptiness of modern life. The political system offers the illusion of choice while ensuring that fundamental power structures remain untouched. All of this requires participation. It requires belief. It requires people who are unconscious enough to keep playing their roles. The awakened person opts out, not necessarily by moving to a cave or rejecting all of society, but by withdrawing their psychological investment in the game. They stop deriving their identity from their job title. They stop measuring their worth through comparison with others. They stop believing that happiness is something to be purchased or achieved in the future. They stop accepting that authority figures know better than their own inner wisdom. And each of these withdrawals represents a loss of power for those who benefit from the sleeping masses. This is why truly awakened people are rarely given platforms in mainstream media. This is why spiritual teachings that actually lead to liberation are marginalized, while watered-down versions that keep people docile are promoted. This is why the education system teaches people what to think rather than how to think. Those in power understand, perhaps unconsciously, that widespread awakening would be the end of their power. Not because awakened people would violently overthrow them, but because awakened people simply wouldn't comply. They wouldn't buy what they're selling. They wouldn't vote for them. They wouldn't work for them under exploitative conditions. They wouldn't fight their wars. They wouldn't consume their products. They wouldn't accept their authority. Power abhors consciousness. It requires unconsciousness to function. Every authoritarian system in history has understood this, which is why they always attack education, art, and spiritual practice first. These are the tools of awakening, and awakening is the enemy of control. Even in democratic societies, more subtle forms of control operate through the same principle. Keep people busy, distracted, anxious, and identified with their roles in the system, and they'll never question the system itself. The awakened person has seen this. They understand that most of what passes for freedom is actually very sophisticated slavery. We're slaves who love our chains because we've been convinced that our chains are for our own good, that they're keeping us safe, that they're giving us identity and purpose. And we attack anyone who suggests we could take them off because we've forgotten how to walk without them, the path forward. So what do we do with all this? If you're someone who's beginning to wake up, how do you navigate a world that fears and resists your consciousness? And if you're someone who's encountered an awakened person and felt that uncomfortable mirror effect, how do you work with what's being revealed? First, understand that awakening is not about becoming special or superior. That's just another ego trap, another role to play. True awakening involves the dissolution of the separate self, not the inflation of it. The awakened person doesn't look down on those who are still asleep. They remember what it was like. They understand the comfort and the fear. They have compassion for the human condition, including its tendency to resist truth in favor of comfortable illusions. Second, recognize that you can't force anyone else to wake up. Each person has their own timing, their own path, their own readiness. When you try to wake someone before they're ready, you often just push them deeper into sleep. The most powerful thing you can do is live your own awakening fully and authentically. Be the proof that another way is possible. Let your peace speak louder than any argument. Let your freedom attract those who are ready to be free. Third, accept that you will lose people. As you wake up, many of your old relationships will fall away. This isn't because you're rejecting people, but because you no longer resonate with the unconscious patterns that held those relationships together. Some people will feel threatened by your growth and will try to pull you back down. Others will simply drift away as your paths diverge. This is natural and necessary. Grieve these losses if you need to, but don't let them convince you to go back to sleep. The connections you form from a place of consciousness will be deeper and more authentic than anything you left behind. Fourth, find your people. You're not alone in this. Throughout history, in every culture, there have been those who wake up. There are communities of conscious individuals, both online and in person, who understand what you're experiencing. These connections are precious. They remind you that you're not crazy, that what you're seeing is real, that the discomfort others feel around you is not your fault or your problem to fix. Fifth, stay grounded. Awakening can sometimes lead to spiritual bypassing, where people use consciousness as an excuse to avoid dealing with practical reality. True awakening includes the mundane. It includes paying your bills, maintaining your health, honoring your commitments, and treating others with respect. The goal is not to float above life, but to be fully present within it, seeing it clearly while participating consciously. And finally, be patient with yourself. Awakening is not a destination, but a process. You'll have moments of clarity and moments of confusion. You'll sometimes slip back into old patterns before catching yourself. You'll occasionally doubt your perceptions or wonder if everyone else is right and you're the crazy one. This is all part of the journey. The difference is that once you've truly seen, you can never completely unsee. That knowledge becomes a compass, always pointing you back toward truth, even when you wander. Here's the ultimate realization that we've been building toward. The reason awakened people scare society is not because they threaten it from the outside, but because they reveal what's always been true but carefully hidden, that the prison has no walls, that the chains are made of belief, that the emperor was never wearing clothes. The entire structure of control, the entire machinery of social conditioning, the entire system that keeps billions of people trapped in cycles of suffering and unconsciousness. All of it depends on a collective agreement to pretend. The awakened person stops pretending. And in that moment, they don't just free themselves. They create a crack in the entire illusion through which others might glimpse the truth. This is what society fears. Not the individual awakened person, but what they represent. The possibility that everyone could wake up. That the game could end. That we could collectively remember what we really are beyond all the roles and identities and stories we've been sold. You are not your job. You are not your bank account. You are not your achievements or your failures. You are not your thoughts or your emotions. You are not even your body, though you express through it. You are the awareness in which all of these experiences arise. You are the space in which life happens. And when you realize this, truly realize it in your bones, and not just as a concept, you become ungovernable. Not in a rebellious, aggressive way, but in a peaceful, unshakable way. You can no longer be controlled through fear because you've seen that what you truly are cannot be threatened. You can no longer be manipulated through desire because you've found completeness within yourself. This is the secret that society works so hard to keep hidden. This is why we're kept busy, distracted, stressed, and unconscious. Because if we all woke up tomorrow, the entire world would change. Not through violence or revolution, but through a simple mass refusal to keep playing roles that don't serve us. The economic system would transform because people would stop equating worth with productivity. The political system would evolve because people would stop giving their power away to authority figures. The social system would open because people would stop judging themselves and others according to arbitrary standards. Everything would shift naturally and organically because the consciousness that created these problems cannot exist alongside awakened awareness. So now you understand why that person who seems so peaceful, so grounded, so free of the anxieties that plague everyone else, why they create such discomfort in social settings, why they're often dismissed, avoided, or attacked. It has nothing to do with anything wrong with them. It has everything to do with what they reflect back to a world that has invested everything in staying asleep. They are a reminder of what we all are beneath the conditioning. They are proof that the cage door is open and always has been. They are living evidence that you don't have to wait for permission or the right circumstances or more time or more money or anything external to be free. You can simply wake up and walk out. And that possibility is the most threatening thing in the world to a system built on unconsciousness. The question is not whether awakened people will continue to scare society. They will, for as long as society remains committed to sleep. The question is whether you'll let that fear guide you, or whether you'll investigate it. Whether you'll defend your unconsciousness, or whether you'll be curious about what lies beyond it. Whether you'll attack the messenger, or whether you'll consider the message. Because every awakened person was once asleep. Every freed individual was once trapped. And if they found the way out, so can you. The path is not easy. It requires giving up comforting illusions. It requires sitting with uncomfortable truths. It requires taking full responsibility for your experience of life rather than blaming circumstances or other people. But the alternative is to spend your entire existence defending a prison that only exists in your mind, attacking anyone who suggests the bars aren't real, and dying without ever knowing what you truly are. That's the real tragedy. Not that awakened people scare society, but that so many people choose fear over freedom, comfort over truth, and sleep over the magnificent possibility of waking up. If this landed for you, subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.